Are you nervous before photo shoots? Here are some tips to flip the perspective. I experienced nerves and anxiousness directly prior to almost all of my shoots and projects. If you are in the industry, or even if you just take photos for fun, I'm sure you will be able to relate to what I'm going to discuss in this video. A few conversations at a recent large commercial photo shoot positively changed my perspective and boosted my confidence behind the camera. To outline, I'm going to need to give you some context of how I perceive myself as a photographer, discuss what the project scope was, what the two conversations that flipped my perspective were, and finally, some takeaways that can hopefully leave you feeling a little more confident behind the lens as well. So let's dive in by going over the scope of this project. This was a big one for me, and I landed a gig with Airbnb, which I am so thankful for and I have been so excited to be a part of. The creative brief basically was cover one of their year-end events. What was interesting and kind of unique was my directions were to stage like 40-50% of them, and 50 to 60% casually. So 50% are directed and 50% are just roaming, kind of trying to catch what you can casually. The event was 3 hours and there's about 200 people at this thing. I do think it's important to kind of discuss how I operate as a photographer, or just human in general, in these circumstances, so that other photographers out there can kind of put it in perspective better and maybe relate to it better. I don't know exactly what this is called, but I tend to devalue my work, feel like, pretty regularly, or my credibility in this industry. There's a few reasons, obviously, aside from like insecurities and whatnot, but I think a part of me has always seen myself as just a photographer and only that. I think the title of photographer has kind of lost some credibility over the last decade or two, because now everybody calls themselves a photographer, and that's not a bad thing. I just think that how I perceive myself is affected by that. And so when somebody asks me what I do and I say photographer, a part of me almost feels embarrassed, strangely, when I say that. And I think that's primarily just my insecurity of thinking like they probably just think I'm like Instagram photographer or whatever. But yeah, I think that's probably where majority stems from, and therefore I sort of discredit myself. So how that affects me going to an event to photograph, it's like escalated, as the role of an event photographer is to be, kindly intrusive and to not be afraid to like have fun with like interrupting people and all that, and I'm not the best at that by any means. Anytime I do events, I'm just a little more anxious and nervous than any other shoots, for sure. So throughout the 3 hours, I first met my agency contact who hired me for Airbnb, and I think this was pretty cool and got me excited. Was she right out the gate told me that they were pretty picky with photographers and that I was selected from a handful. She said when we sent over options to Airbnb, they were pretty immediate on choosing yours. And so I just feel like that is really cool. Winning bids is just over, sometimes other larger companies and photographers or whatnot. It makes you feel good. It's part of the reason the game of business is so fun is, you lose some, but when you win some, it's sick. It's really cool. So that just felt good to hear coming from her. And then the second conversation I had was about 2 hours in, and it was with an employee that was just attending, and he runs apps or something in Airbnb, and I just kind of opened up to him a little bit about how I felt really pretty anxious like walking into the event, and how I'm not the best at being intrusive, behind the camera or whatnot. And he's like, dude, do you know the company you're working for right now? And I was like, yeah. He's like, dude, they care about the image of this company in a really good way, which means they don't hire no slouches. He didn't say that, but he's like, they hire really good photographers, videographers, visualists that actually, you know, stand out and match the brand. So he's like, you need to understand, like, they hired you because you're good at what you do. And then he was like, secondly, all these employees that are here, whenever a photographer is around, we all understand that they're probably really, really good, and that an opportunity to be in front of the camera means we might be on the next Airbnb commercial or poster, or, you know, and we want those opportunities. It's like, I had not even come close to thinking about it that way, and him saying that, I was like, it was like a light bulb moment, you know, of like, oh shit, like, these people are stoked that I'm here. That's pretty cool. And so it's one of those immediately, like, I feel more confident, you know, and I'm okay with being more intrusive, and like, yeah. So I think that was just for sure my highlight of the event. I honestly haven't really had the chance to talk to any photographers about feeling this way, so I am partly putting all this out here to see what others think, and if anyone can relate to this feeling of almost inadequacy or whatever the hell it is, you know, we'll see. Here's what I have taken away from this experience, and hopefully if you have felt out of place when working photo gigs before, this can kind of reframe your perspective on yourself as well. Number one is, no matter what level your work is at, if someone is asking you to take photos, it is for a reason. They see something of value behind your work, so you need to believe it like they do. Number two, who the fuck does not get anxious before having to talk to strangers? This is normal, especially in today's world. We live half our damn lives virtually, it feels like, so to expect not to be anxious before random solo human interaction with people is normal. I will say it does get easier. I can tell you from putting myself in these circumstances for 10 years now in photography, but the nerves and anxiousness will always be a thing on some level, and that's okay. I think it makes you stronger as a person. Number three is, be more vulnerable with those you work with. Had I not openly expressed feeling anxious going into the event to the apps guy, I would not have been able to learn how I was actually perceived by employees at this event. If you took the time to watch this, thank you. Let me know if you have experienced anything similar. I would love to hear other photographers' perspectives. Keep capturing and building that confidence. Peace.